Alright, next we're going to prep our power assembly. So what we're going to do is remove the clear heat shrink as well as remove the motor wire leads. Alright, next we're going to put our prop adapters on. So what you get when you get your motors is that you'll get this small packet with your prop adapter nuts. So go ahead and pour this out, I'll show you. So you get your prop adapter, your bullet nut, as well as the top washer that goes on top of the prop. Take that off. These small screws are what you're supposed to mount your motor on, but these are way too short. You can just keep these and use these for something else. That's what I usually use them for. Okay. So the only screws you'll need are the long silver screws. And so what you want to do is put the prop adapter in, line up your holes. Then I use just a small bit of Loctite. I'll drop it down, I'll screw each one in. But I'm not going to torque them all down just yet. Alright, once they're down, then I'm going to go back and torque them. Just a little bit. Alright. Then you got your prop adapter on. So with me, I don't use these bullet nuts that come with it. I use a nylon lock nut. I believe these are 5mm nuts, and I'll use these in place of it because if you don't tighten these down really good, they will come off. So these work, and these are great. Okay, so we got the ESCs prepped. We removed the motor wire leads. Also, I re-tinned each of the pads. So now these are good to go. Next thing we want to do is prep our motors. So what we want to do is remove these 3.5mm plugs right here. So all I'll do is cut these off pretty much. So basically just want to snip all these off. These come off. Then you're just left with your basic motor wire. So what we're going to do is just take our utility knife and just cut the heat shrink around underneath so we can solder it to the pads. So once you snip the connectors off, cut a little bit of the heat shrink back, you should be left with your bare motor leads. Now this is ready to be soldered to your ESC. So now what we want to do is solder the motors to the ESCs. I like to do this before I mount any of the components itself. This one already done. I soldered the wires to the ESC. I switched one wire, so this one will give me a clockwise rotation. This one will do straight, and then the next two I'll do opposite. So we'll go ahead and solder these on. Alright, so we have our soldered motor leads to our ESC, and this will give us counterclockwise rotation. Okay, so I finished my wiring assembly. So I wired my motors to my ESCs. I have two crossed and two straight. So this will give me my correct rotations. Now I can put heat shrink on these ESCs, and then I can go ahead and mount them to my frame. Okay, so we have our ESCs soldered and we've applied our heat shrink. So this is what you'll have at the end. So I have a set with straight wires, and I have a set with one cross wire. So this will give us clockwise for these two, and these will give us counterclockwise. So now we're going to mount these to the frame. Okay, now as far as our mounting goes, you're going to start with the top left, you're going to have clock, counter, then clock, and counter. So that's how we'll do that as far as our motor ESC installation. Okay, so we got our motors mounted, and it looks like we have a mess. So what we're going to do now is put our ESCs underneath our arms and run our wires up. So let's do that now. You do it one at a time. No rush. This will really help keep the wires together and keep it real clean looking. So flip it over, so you got it. So this will be your front. So I have my motor leads coming off to the left and this into the right. That's the way I wanted it. So I went the same way for the back. So I'll have that one going back, and then this one swept back this way. And so our last one. And the main time-consuming part really is soldering the ESCs and the motor wires. That's really where your time goes. Alright, then we'll flip it over. Snug it up. We'll get these ESCs in place here in a moment once we zip tie them down. And then when we zip tie them down, they'll be good to go. And it'll give us a little bit cleaner of a look. Alright, so now we're ready for our power distribution board, which will be this right here. This will mount up to the center, and then we'll attach our negative and positive, and so on from there. Okay, so I went ahead and zipped my ESCs down. So this is my end result. This way they won't be bouncing around everywhere. So also you can push your wires through, that way they'll avoid this nut right here. Alright, so now you got your positive, negative for each ESC. Okay, show you guys what I've done for my battery connector for my power distribution board. I went with the Dean's connector because that's what I use on my batteries. But I shortened it, and I want it to be shorter because I want it to be butted up close as I can up to the frame. I don't like to have any extra wire hanging down because the time you add the length of the battery wire and your battery connector, you got a pretty big loop hanging out there. So what I did was soldered it on my my wire, and then I put 2 things of heat shrink per lead. Then what I did was put a larger piece of heat shrink all the way up to the end of the connector. So that should give it pretty good insulation because the carbon fiber frame is pretty sharp on the edges, so it's going to leave a little bit of an indentation, but which is fine. I put enough heat shrink to take into account for that. So then what I did was put my power distribution board on my frame, and then just mark this, put this where it was on my frame, and just marked it. I just used my Allen wrench and just pressed down real hard and just cut up above it and snipped it. So now I want to just from here just tin these and then solder it up to my power distribution board. Okay, so what I've done is taken my power distribution board, pre-tinned it, and pre-tinned the tips of my battery lead for my connector. So I'm going to put this underneath for how it's going to go on my quadcopter. So now I'm just going to solder this to it. Okay, so for my battery connector, what I've done was is fish it through between the 2 center plates. And then, so since I have enough heat shrink around the wires, it's going to keep it nice and snug. So that's what I'm going for. Just popping out just a little bit like that. I don't like it hanging all the way out there. So to do this, it's going to be kind of tricky. You're going to need some pliers to hold it in place. So I'm just using some small pliers. So before you do that, you gotta make sure your iron is tinned, or your solder tip. That way you're good to go. Alright. Sit that down. It's gonna be kind of hard to see. Alright. And if you did like I just did, I just touched my ESC lead, not paying attention. So be sure to be aware of that. So it's still kind of tricky. I haven't gotten it yet. So I'm not done on soldering that. We need more solder to add to it. Okay, I have my power distribution wired up to my battery lead. Now what I want to do now is put my standoffs for my flight control board. So when you get your standoffs, you're going to use the longer of the 2, and you're going to use it for the inner slots. I've already done 2 already, and so I'm going to get the other 2 threaded, and then your flight control board are going to sit on the nuts. So I'm gonna get these screwed in, and then we'll see the finished product. Okay, so our standoffs for our flight controller are installed. Now we're gonna put in our PCB board, and then are going to solder in our positive and negative for our ESCs. Alright. Okay, so where we left off was I had the excess power leads for each ESC. So I cut those down and soldered each one to the power distribution board. Now from there we're ready for our to calibrate our ESCs. Okay, so we're going to attach our ESC leads to our flight control board. So I made a little diagram. It just helps me with my wiring. So you got your motor 1, 2, 3, and 4. So this will be your 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that's how we're going to wire that. So I keep that up just to help me. So this is my motor 1, and it's going to go into the motor 1 slot, which is on your far right, and your signal is pointed up. Next to your motor 2, into your motor 2. With the white facing up for your signal. Next to your motor 3, into your 3 port. Then your motor 4. And that's it.